In the narrow alleys of Kibagare, a forgotten slum on the edge of Nairobi, a baby cried beneath a torn plastic sheet. His mother, Aking, wrapped him in a faded kitenge and whispered his name, Iwobi, meaning born of struggle. That night, the slum mourned and rejoiced at once. Aking died moments later, and a new life began in the cold hands of poverty. Iwobi's childhood was a collision of chaos and courage. He had no one but Mama Chiku, the old woman who helped his mother give birth and occasionally offered him porridge scraped from the bottom of a soot-blackened sufuria. He ran barefoot through mud and glass, ducking police chases and thieving gangs. By 5, he knew how to avoid beatings, how to spot a tourist with loose change, and how to eat from dumpsters without shame. But deep inside, he nursed a strange feeling of flame. Iwobi wasn't just surviving. He was watching, learning, waiting. Every handshake, every deal on the street, every lie and smile. He noticed. He didn't know it, but the streets were shaping a mind that would one day command empires. Hunger wasn't just a feeling to Iwobi, it was a voice. It growled in his belly and whispered in his ear, driving him to snatch mangoes from stalls and steal leftover chapati from roadside cafes. But hunger also taught him humility. One day, a mama mboga caught him stealing, and instead of beating him, she gave him a job peeling onions for 5 shillings a day. Iwobi's hands bled from the sharp knife, and his eyes burned from the onion fumes. But he showed up every day. The woman, Mama Jerusha, grew fond of him. She told him stories while they worked, tales of kings and traders, of African empires that once ruled with wisdom and gold. Those stories planted pride in him. "You're not just a street boy," she once said. "You are clay. What you become depends on how you're shaped." Of onions on his fingers. He saved every coin he earned. 5 shillings turned to 10, then 20. He didn't know what he was saving for, but he knew that one day, his moment would come, and he wanted to be ready. One cold July night, the skies broke open above Kibagare. Rain poured like punishment from the gods, flooding the slums and turning alleys into rivers of filth. Iwobi curled under a sack beneath an old bus, shivering, coughing, nearly giving in to the chill. Around him, street boys fought over space, warmth, and survival. That night, Iwobi almost died. Fever gripped him, and his body shook. But a hand touched his forehead. It was Baba Chage, a madman most avoided. Yet he carried Iwobi to a clinic where the nurse, out of pity, gave the boy medicine and let him rest on a worn-out mattress. When he recovered, Iwobi sought out Baba Chage. "Why help me?" he asked. The old man just laughed. "Because one day, you'll help thousands, and they'll ask the same question." From that moment, Iwobi carried a new lesson. Madness and wisdom sometimes wear the same face. Iwobi's luck changed the day he found a red leather wallet near the city market. Inside was money, real money, and an ID card with the name David Weeksa. He stared at the cash, his stomach roaring. It was enough to eat well for weeks, maybe even buy new clothes. But something in his gut twisted. He remembered Mama Jerusha's stories about honest kings and wise traders. After hours of thinking, Iwobi walked to the police post and handed over the wallet. The officers laughed. A street boy returning money? But one of them called the owner, and Mr. Weeksa came in person. Weeksa was a businessman, shocked and moved by Iwobi's honesty. "Why didn't you keep it?" he asked. Iwobi replied, "Because I want to sleep like a king, not eat like a thief." That answer earned him something more valuable than money, an invitation. Mr. Weeksa took Iwobi for lunch, the first real restaurant meal of his life. Iwobi sat awkwardly, confused by the forks and the cloth napkins, but he listened as Weeksa spoke of business, imports, and vision. Before they parted, the businessman handed him a card. "If you ever want to work, come find me." Iwobi kept the card like treasure, but he didn't go to Weeksa immediately. He felt unworthy. Instead, he went back to work peeling onions, sweeping stalls, and helping vendors. He wanted to be ready to grow. Months passed. Then one day, when Mama Jerusha's stall was destroyed by city council bulldozers, Iwobi walked across town, barefoot and determined, to Weeksa's office. He was done waiting. Weeksa's office was in a tall building with guards in suits. Iwobi stood at the gate, nervous and dusty. When the receptionist called up, Weeksa told them, "Let him in." Iwobi got a job, not in the boardroom, but in janitorial services. He was to clean floors and wipe windows. He took it with pride. While mopping, he listened to conversations. While emptying bins, he read thrown-away reports. At night, he studied from discarded newspapers and old accounting books. He never wasted a moment. One late evening, Weeks had caught him reading financial news while others joked outside. "You're not like them," he said. "You're learning." And so, he moved iwobi to the mailroom, then the filing department. One step closer to destiny. In the filing room, iwobi discovered he had a gift. Numbers spoke to him. He could see patterns in invoices, spot errors in balance sheets, and calculate profits in his head. Weeks' accountant noticed and recommended iwobi for training. Weeks sponsored him for evening classes and basic bookkeeping. iwobi worked during the day and studied at night. His body grew thin from exhaustion, but his mind expanded like a sponge soaking truth. After a year, he passed his exams. Weeks promoted him to junior accountant. For the first time, iwobi had a desk, a salary. Success brought joy, but life never forgot to test him. One day, iwobi rushed back to Kibagare after hearing that Mama Jerusha had fallen ill. She lay on a dirty mattress, coughing blood, her stall gone and her body broken. He tried to move her to a clinic, but it was too late. Her final words were, "iwobi, don't forget who you are. Turn your pain into power." She died in his arms. He wept not just for her, but for the thousands like her who never had a chance. That night, iwobi made a vow. He would not chase money for himself. He would build something that lifted others from the mud. Mama Jerusha's memory would become his mission. With his small savings, iwobi bought a kiosk for a street vendor whose business had been crushed, just like Jerusha's. He ran it like a company: records, pricing, staff, savings. Within months, the kiosk expanded. Encouraged, he started another, then a third. He hired street kids like himself, trained them, and demanded discipline. Slowly, his network grew. From juice stands to second-hand clothes, then to boda delivery services, all managed with street-smart precision. Weeks watched with pride and curiosity. "You've become a businessman," he told iwobi one day. Iwobi replied, "Not yet. I'm building an army of the forgotten." By the time he turned 25, iwobi was no longer a boy cleaning windows. He was the founder of Rise, a chain of small businesses run entirely by youth from the slums. Investors began to notice. Journalists called him the street CEO, but not everyone applauded. Established tycoons sneered, and local gangs, threatened by his success, began demanding protection fees. When he refused, they attacked one of his kiosks. A boy he had trained was injured. iwobi stood before the media and declared, "This is not just business, it's a revolution. And I'm not afraid." The city began to listen. So did the world. iwobi's bold stand made headlines. TV stations interviewed him, newspapers praised his courage, and even ministers began to mention his name. He became the face of a rising generation, youth who refused to be crushed by poverty. But the attention brought new dangers. Political players saw him as a threat and others as an opportunity. Behind closed doors, businessmen whispered, "Who is this street boy stirring the system?" Some tried to buy him out, others tried to break him down with fake legal threats. But iwobi remained grounded. He had lived through hunger and rain. Boardroom threats were just noise. Still, iwobi knew he needed to learn more if he was to play in the bigger leagues. So, while managing Rise, he applied for a scholarship abroad. And when it came, he left not for luxury, but for knowledge, with a promise. "I will return, not just to build business, but to build a nation." In Germany, iwobi felt like a stranger in a perfect world. Clean streets, silent trains, people with no need to beg. He sat in lectures at a top business school, often the only African in the room, and many doubted him. One professor asked bluntly, "How can someone from the streets run a company?" Instead of shame, iwobi smiled. "Because I studied at the University of Survival." Slowly, the class began to respect him. He spoke of African markets, of informal economies, of the resilience of slum communities. Soon, they listened, not as students to a classmate, but as future leaders to a thinker. He devoured knowledge, economics, tech, leadership, and wrote a paper that shook the academic halls: Street Logic, Business Lessons from the Margins. The paper was published globally, but even then, he missed the dusty scent of home. So, when his final semester ended, he returned to Nairobi, hungrier than ever. When iwobi returned, he was welcomed like royalty in the slums. Youth carried placards. Mama Bogas wept. Reporters followed his every move. But iwobi didn't bask in fame. He went straight to work. He expanded Soko Rise into a digital app, allowing street vendors to sell goods online. If Amazon can do it for the West, he said, why not us? The app took off like wildfire. Vendors signed up in thousands. He hired street photographers to help display their goods, trained youth in basic digital skills, and created call centers that employed hundreds from Kibagera and Mathar. Iwobi's dream was working, but with every rise came resistance. Big supermarkets and online stores began lobbying to shut him down. He was accused of operating illegally. Once again, the streets prepared for war. Iwobi woke up one morning to find his office torched. The air smelled of smoke and betrayal. His staff wept, data servers were ruined, and investors panicked. That same day, he received a court order halting operations over regulatory violations. But Iwobi didn't break. Instead, he called a press conference right in the ashes of his building. Cameras flashed as he stood in front of the ruins, wearing a dusty coat, and said, "They can burn the walls, but not the will." He fought back legally, showing that Soko Rise had created over 8,000 jobs and lifted hundreds from poverty. The people rallied behind him. Petitions were signed, protests held, and even celebrities joined in. In the end, the court ruled in his favor. The fire that was meant to destroy him only made him shine brighter. Despite the chaos, Soko Rise reached a milestone, 1 billion Kenyan shillings in revenue. It wasn't just a number, it was a symbol. Iwobi hosted a gathering not in a hotel, but in Kibagera. Under the stars, he held a feast where all street vendors came to eat freely. "This billion is ours," he said. "It belongs to every onion I peeled, every step I ran barefoot." He refused to buy flashy cars or mansions. Instead, he built learning centers in the slums, created mentorship programs, and started a loan fund for street startups. His message was simple: make others rise with you. That night, under a full moon, an old woman approached him. It was Mama Chiku, the one who helped deliver him. "I always knew you were born different," she said. Iwobi knelt and kissed her feet. For him, success was never about leaving the street, but lifting it. Iwobi received a letter inviting him to the Young President's Summit in Ghana, a gathering of Africa's top young innovators. He arrived in a simple suit, carrying nothing but his voice and a presentation about creating giants from the dust. Other delegates came in limousines, wore expensive watches, and presented flashy ideas. But when Iwobi spoke, the room went silent. He shared real stories, real struggles, real change. His words cut deeper than graphs and charts. At the end of his speech, the audience rose in thunderous applause. A South African investor offered him $2 million. A Nigerian tech giant proposed a partnership. For the first time, Iwobi realized his mission was no longer just Kenyan. It was African. As Iwobi's fame grew, so did envy. Someone within his team began leaking documents, selling internal secrets, and mismanaging funds. Rumors spread. Donors questioned his leadership. Some partners withdrew. It broke Iwobi's heart. He had trusted his team like brothers. But betrayal often wears a familiar face. After an internal investigation, the traitor was found. It was his childhood friend, Odhiambo, whom he had raised from the streets. Iwobi didn't scream. He didn't arrest him. Instead, he called Odhiambo in private and said, "I gave you trust. You gave me truth. Now I know what loyalty costs." Odhiambo wept, but Iwobi let him go not with anger, but with wisdom. The path to greatness, he now knew, was often walked alone. One evening, a top political party approached Iwobi. They offered him a parliamentary ticket for Westland's constituency. "You have the numbers," they said. "The people love you." But Iwobi hesitated. "I am not ready to be a politician. My power is not in speeches, it's in systems." They pushed harder, promising support, power, and even a shot at cabinet and future. But he declined. Instead, he started a nonprofit lobbying for youth economic rights and policy change. "I don't need a seat in parliament to change the law," he said. "I need a loud voice and an army of street believers." And he had both. One rainy evening, while hosting a street outreach in Kisumu, a trembling old woman stared at him for long. She approached slowly and whispered, "Iwobi, my son." He froze. It was impossible. His mother had died, or so he thought. But the woman, aching, explained she had survived that night but was forced into hiding by tribal clashes. For years, she believed Iwobi had died too. Fate had separated them. Now, fate brought them together. They wept in the rain. Reporters captured the moment, and the country cried with them. Iwobi built her a quiet home and visited her every weekend. "Now I know," he said, that even broken roots can find their tree again. At 30, Iwobi was declared by Forbes Africa as one of the youngest self-made billionaires. But when they asked what car he drove or where he vacationed, he laughed. "I own no mansion. My wealth is in faces, every girl in school because of my fund, every boy off the street because of my kiosk." His offices were still modest. His clothes were simple. But his impact? It was global. African leaders consulted him, UN agencies invited him, and yet, every Monday morning, he still visited the back streets of Kibigare to sip tea with vendors. He had done the impossible, built an empire not on inheritance, but on pain, grit, and hope. And this was just the beginning. Iwobi launched the Street Boy Scholarship, a program designed to educate former street kids in practical business, agriculture, and technology. The pilot group included 50 boys and girls from Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa. They were skeptical at first, expecting broken promises like so many before. But Iwobi personally mentored the first class. He showed them how to turn fruit carts into mobile juice businesses and how to grow mushrooms in sacks using slum waste. One of the boys, Kamau, cried when he earned his first 1,000 shillings. "I never thought I'd hold this much without stealing," he whispered. The program became a national sensation. Iwobi expanded it, funded by well-wishers and his own profits. It was more than charity, it was a revolution. "We're not saving them," he said. "We're showing them they were kings all along. They just forgot." One early morning, Iwobi received an official call from State House. The president wanted to meet him. Dressed in his usual shirt and jeans, he arrived with no entourage, no loud motorcade, just a notebook and a purpose. The president shook his hand and said, "Young man, you've done more for the youth than 3 ministries combined." But Iwobi didn't beam. He simply replied, "Mr. President, I'm just filling the gaps that your systems forgot." That boldness earned respect. They discussed policy changes, funding for street enterprise, and a possible youth council. As Iwobi left, a minister asked him, "Why not run for office again?" He smiled. "Because if I enter the system too early, I might forget the dust I came from." Her name was Angela, a graceful woman who ran a children's home in R.A.T. She and Iwobi met at a youth forum and connected instantly. For the first time, Iwobi felt his heart soften. They laughed, they built projects together, and slowly, he led her into the tender parts of his story. But one day, a journalist leaked documents showing Angela had been secretly siphoning funds from donor projects. The story hit him like a blade. He confronted her, hoping for a lie, but she confessed. "I was desperate," she cried. "I didn't want to lose you." Heartbroken, Iwobi walked away. He didn't expose her. He didn't shame her. But his trust, once golden, had been cracked. "Even love," he wrote in his journal that night, "must be earned by truth." In Accra, Iwobi met Kwame Otto, an 80-year-old business legend who had mentored Nelson Mandela's fund. Kwame had heard of Iwobi and invited him for a 3-day retreat in the Volta Highlands. There, they walked by rivers, studied ancient trade maps, and discussed the spiritual side of leadership. "Do not become rich in coins and poor in soul," Kwame told him. "Africa has had many kings. What we lack are fathers." That statement changed Iwobi's view of legacy. He no longer wanted to build just businesses. He wanted to build a generation. He left Ghana not just with ideas, but with vision. He would begin mentoring 100 young African founders each year. The program would be called Ash Africa, Power and Purpose. The more Iwobi rose, the louder the knives behind his back became. Rival entrepreneurs spread lies that he was laundering money, backed by cartels, or even funded by foreign intelligence. Tabloids feasted on his every move. One day, a news anchor ran a false story linking him to corruption. Investors panicked. His app downloads dropped. Contracts were canceled. It was the biggest crisis since the fire. But this time, Iwobi had a secret weapon: truth. He called a press conference, presented all financial documents, let journalists tour his offices, and even took a polygraph test on live television. "Let the liars burn," he said. "I'll stay standing in the fire." The truth set him free. Again, Iwobi returned to Kibigare with a new idea: a mall built by the people, for the people. It would include stalls, digital hubs, training centers, clinics, and even a rooftop garden. Architects laughed. A mall in a slum? They mocked. But Iwobi persisted. He partnered with NGOs, crowd-funded from the diaspora, and hired only slum residents for the construction. In 18 months, the impossible rose from dust, the Kibagir Innovation Market, KIM. On opening day, thousands came. Drums were beaten, flags waved. Old vendors moved into tiled stalls. Even children got to play in the digital center. It wasn't just a building. It was proof that dignity could be built with bricks. One rainy Sunday, Iwobi made an unannounced visit to the orphanage he once slept outside of as a child. The guard didn't recognize him and tried to block his entry. "I used to sleep by that gate," Iwobi said quietly. The man blinked in disbelief. Inside, he found hungry children, broken beds, and overwhelmed staff. That night, he stayed up with them, sharing food, stories, and warmth. One girl asked, "Will we ever be rich like you?" He knelt and whispered, "You already are. You just don't see it yet." Weeks later, he rebuilt the orphanage, new beds, full kitchens, books, and computers. He renamed it the Home of Hope and made sure no child there ever slept cold again. In Morocco, during a Pan-African business forum, Iwobi was introduced to a real monarch, King Hassan II. As they shook hands, the king asked, "What do you do, young man?" "I used to clean streets. Now I clean systems," Iwobi replied boldly. The king laughed and invited him for dinner. Over couscous and mint tea, they discussed African trade corridors, youth employment, and technology. The king pledged to invest in Soko Rise and invited Iwobi to consult for North Africa's street economy reforms. That night, Iwobi looked at the stars and thought, from gutters to palaces. But I'm still Iwobi, the boy who watched, the boy who learned. Mama Chiku, the herbalist who helped deliver Iwobi and kept him alive in childhood, fell ill. At 97, her breath became slower, her body frailer. Iwobi stayed by her side for days, feeding her, reading stories to her, and singing old Luo lullabies. Her final words were, "You are my seed. Now plant more." She died in his arms, her face peaceful. Iwobi buried her with honor, building a small memorial in Kibagir where street kids could come and learn about her kindness. He cried, not just from loss, but from gratitude. "Without her," he said, "there would be no me." In her honor, Iwobi launched the Golden Seed Fund, a 1 billion shilling fund to support elderly caregivers in slums, those like Mama Chiku who raise orphans and abandoned children without any help. He called it his most personal project. Each caregiver received food, stipends, and access to training. Many wept when they were visited by Iwobi himself. "No one has ever asked how we survive," one old man said. Until now. The Golden Seed Fund became a continental model, copied in 11 countries. For Iwobi, it wasn't just about business anymore. It was about restoration, healing old roots, and watering the seeds that raised him. Years had passed since Iwobi had last seen the abandoned bus he once slept under as a child. One misty morning, he returned to that forgotten alley in Kibagir, now surrounded by metal shacks and mechanics. The bus, rusted and overgrown with vines, was still there. He stood before it in silence, running his hand along the metal. A child peeped out from under it, another street boy, no older than he had been. Iwobi gave the boy his jacket, then whispered, "This used to be my palace." That day, he bought the land surrounding the bus and transformed it into a shelter and library named the Bus of Beginnings. There, every street child could read, dream, and begin their own journey. One afternoon, Iwobi received an anonymous message. "Your security is weak. I've broken in. Let's talk." He tracked the message and found it was from a 17-year-old hacker named Musa in Mombasa. The boy had grown up coding from public cyber cafes and had hacked several African websites, not for theft, but for attention. Instead of punishment, Iwobi flew to Mombasa and met Musa. "Use your gift for good," he told him. He hired the boy to build cyber defense for Soko Rise and launched a program for tech training called Code from the Streets. Musa would later become the continent's youngest cybersecurity expert, all because someone saw potential where others saw crime. The United Nations invited Iwobi to New York to speak at the General Assembly about youth empowerment and poverty innovation. He walked onto the stage wearing a simple Ankara shirt stitched by Kibagir women. No suit, no gold watch. The room was filled with presidents, CEOs, and royalty. But when Iwobi spoke, the room went still. "Africa's greatest resource," he said, "is not minerals or oil. It's the child sleeping on cardboard, whose brain burns with untapped brilliance." His speech went viral. Donors pledged millions. But more importantly, policies shifted. The world began to see African street kids not as problems, but as possibilities. Enemies struck again. This time, they claimed Iwobi's charity funds were mismanaged. A fake whistleblower came forward. The headline screamed, "Iwobi's empire of lies?" Iwobi didn't flinch. He invited global auditors, handed over all accounts, and streamed the process live online. What they found instead was a perfectly managed operation, every coin traced, every shilling accounted for. The fake accuser later confessed to being bribed by business rivals. The scandal reversed on them. Iwobi's reputation became even stronger. His only comment was, "Truth needs no defense, only light." For years, he avoided love. But then came Nia, a social entrepreneur from Tanzania who ran mobile schools for refugees. She was fierce, brilliant, and unapologetically African. They met at a Pan-African summit and bonded over a shared vision. 2 years later, they married, not in a ballroom, but in Kibigare. Vendors decorated the streets with flowers. Street kids danced. Politicians, media, and even rival businessmen came not to watch, but to witness. Their vows were simple: to build, to lift, to serve. It was not just a marriage. It was a celebration of two warriors joined in purpose. Nia gave birth to twin boys, Aking and Weeksa, named after Iwobi's late mother and the man who once gave him his first job. Holding them, Iwobi wept for all the children who never had fathers. He changed his schedule, made time to be present, to sing lullabies, to read them bedtime stories, including his own, one they would one day fully understand. Fatherhood softened him, but also made him fiercer. Now he said, "I'm not just building for the streets. I'm building for the bloodline, for legacy." One night, a man knocked on Iwobi's door. He was ragged, thin, eyes haunted. "I am your father," he said. The room fell into silence. The man, once a truck driver, had fled after a robbery gone wrong. For years, he hid in Uganda, drowning in alcohol and guilt. He had seen Iwobi on TV and followed him for months, unsure of whether he deserved forgiveness. Iwobi took a deep breath. Then he hugged him. "You may not have raised me," he whispered, "but maybe now I can help raise you." Redemption, like success, was a door he always kept unlocked. When tribal clashes broke out in Rift Valley, Iwobi flew to the conflict zone and walked into the heart of the violence. Guns echoed in the hills. Smoke rose from burning homes. He met elders from both sides, refusing security guards. "I was born in tribal fire," he said, "but I will die in tribal peace." Through negotiation, community outreach, and youth forums, he brokered a fragile peace. Later, both communities built a market together and named it Iwobi Center. Once again, he had turned bloodshed into brotherhood. Ash Africa, his mentorship program, exploded in growth. From Ghana to Malawi, it trained over 10,000 young entrepreneurs. Some started eco-villages. Others launched fashion empires. All followed the same mantra: rise, reach, remember. Iwobi gave each graduate a bracelet made of scrap metal. "This," he told them, "reminds you where you came from, and that even trash can shine." Ash Africa became the first youth-run development firm to be accepted by the African Union as a consulting body. The boy once rejected by the system was now helping to rewrite it. On his 35th birthday, Iwobi sat alone on a hill overlooking Nairobi. No bodyguards, no cameras, just wind, memory, and stars. He thought of Mama Jerusha's onions, of sleeping in rain, of Mama Chiku's hands, of Kamal's first earnings, of Angela's tears, of Nia's smile, of his son's laughter, of the pain, the ashes, the rise. He wasn't the richest man in Africa by bank standards, but by the number of lives transformed, minds awakened, and hope restored. He was a giant. A voice whispered in his heart, "You did not just survive, Iwobi. You redeemed the dust." And with that, he closed his eyes and smiled. Iwobi was invited to speak at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, standing alongside billionaires, presidents, and royalty. The theme was the future of humanity. Others spoke of artificial intelligence, crypto wealth, and colonizing Mars. When Iwobi stood, he paused, looking directly into the eyes of power. "Before we send rockets to space," he said, "let's make sure no child sleeps on cardboard." His words didn't shake the room, they silenced it. After his speech, philanthropists offered funding. Tech moguls pledged partnerships. But most importantly, slum leaders back in Africa stood taller. One of their own had spoken not for money, but for meaning, for humanity. A corrupt real estate company began demolishing slum homes in Nairobi, displacing thousands. Bulldozers crushed houses at night without warning. Cries echoed through the darkness. Iwobi stood in the front lines, arm in arm with youth and mothers. He live-streamed the demolitions and confronted officials live on air. This is not development. This is destruction. The country rallied. Courts intervened. Demolitions were paused. The land was investigated, and a tribunal ruled it illegally seized. The slum was saved, and in honor of the resistance, the people named their rebuilt village New Jerusha. As Soko Rise expanded across Africa, it became the target of cyber attacks from global cartels who wanted to control African e-commerce. Overnight, thousands of user accounts were frozen. Orders vanished. Iwobi summoned Musa, the former street hacker, who now led a digital army of young African coders. "We don't just need to fight back," Musa said. "We need to build better firewalls than the West." Within 48 hours, the system was restored. But Iwobi went further. He built a Pan-African cybersecurity alliance and opened coding schools across 12 countries. "We must defend our future," he said, from behind the screen as well. Nia, Iwobi's wife, was diagnosed with breast cancer. The news shattered their world. She, who had marched into refugee camps and battled governments, now fought an invisible enemy within. Iwobi stepped back from public appearances. He cooked, cleaned, and held her through the pain. He shaved his head in solidarity and documented their journey, raw, honest, human. Nia fought like a lioness. After 8 grueling months of treatment, she was declared cancer-free. They held a Thanksgiving celebration in Kibigare. "We have faced fire," Nia said, "and still we rise." Kamau, the first boy Iwobi ever mentored, graduated from university and launched a fintech platform for slum-based microloans. It spread like wildfire across East Africa. People began calling him the second Iwobi. But Iwobi pulled him aside. "Don't be me," he said. "Be better. Be braver. Be yourself." Kamau smiled. "Then I'll be the storm after your reign." Iwobi appointed him as deputy director of Soko Rise's Youth Innovation Wing. A boy who once had nothing was now helping thousands rise, proving that Iwobi's legacy had roots. One Christmas, Iwobi canceled all public events. Instead, he held a concert in Kibigare. No sponsors. No VIPs. Just local musicians, street choirs, and dancers. Food flowed freely, laughter echoed, and even the elderly danced. He took no photos, gave no speeches, just sat among children and shared mandatsi and chai. One girl whispered, "I want to be like you when I grow up." He smiled. "Then you'll be more than rich. You'll be unstoppable." The concert became an annual tradition. They called it the night the streets sang. A global conglomerate, threatened by Iwobi's growing market share in West Africa, launched a smear campaign. They bribed media houses, published fake research, and pressured governments to revoke Soko Rise licenses. For a moment, it worked. Contracts were canceled. Share prices dropped. Iwobi went silent. Then he published a documentary, The Price of Suppression, revealing the tactics used against African entrepreneurs. It was viewed by 50 million people in 1 week. Protesters rallied across capital cities. The conglomerate was fined billions. Africa had spoken, and Iwobi had reminded the world, "You may attack one man, but you cannot kill a movement." Iwobi launched the Street Stock Exchange, SSX, a platform where informal businesses could be listed, traded, and invested in. Shoe repairmen, vegetable sellers, boda groups all got a chance to own shares and build credit. Financial experts scoffed. "It'll never work." But within a year, the SSX had over 500,000 active users across 5 countries. One Mama Boga grew her stall into a chain of organic produce shops and became a millionaire. For the first time in history, the streets had a financial voice. And Iwobi didn't just build the bridge, he gave the people their first passport to wealth. A political riot broke out near one of Soko Rise's markets. Chaos spread. Looters targeted the stalls. Fire spread. Youth were beaten. Iwobi raced into the chaos with Kamau and a few volunteers, urging calm. He was hit by a stray tear gas canister and collapsed. News spread fast. Iwobi injured in protest. The country froze. But within 2 days, he was back on his feet, giving a live speech with bandages still on. "I am not bulletproof," he said, "but I am rooted. And what is rooted does not fall in storms." His words became a national quote. Graffiti artists painted it on walls across Nairobi. The African Union finally offered Iwobi a permanent seat as a youth economic advisor. For the first time, he sat at the same table as presidents, ministers, and heads of state, not as a guest, but as a voice. When asked what policy he would implement first, he replied, "Every child born in the street must be treated as a future leader. Let us invest accordingly." The room went silent. And then, they clapped, not for formality, but from hearts stirred awake. The street boy had not just entered the palace. He was helping reshape the throne. Iwobi commissioned 100 young African artists to paint murals in slums across the continent, each wall telling a different story of street survival, victory, or dream. He called it the Voice of the Walls campaign. One painting showed a barefoot boy holding a golden torch. Another showed a crying mother feeding a child with invisible food. The walls weren't just art, they were protest, therapy, memory. When a tourist asked, "What's the point of painting poverty?" a little girl replied, "Because when people see our pain, they stop ignoring it." Iwobi smiled. The walls had begun to speak. A group of slum youth turned their life experiences into music, hard beats, sharp lyrics, deep truth. They called themselves the Mud Kings. Their music went viral, and soon, they were invited to perform internationally. Iwobi supported them with instruments, a studio, and legal support. But he warned them, fame is not freedom. Stay grounded. Stay clean. They listened. Their song Chini Kwarju from the bottom to the top charts. When they performed at a global concert, they introduced themselves not as celebrities, but as children of Iwobi's dream. To honor his late mother Aking and all the forgotten mothers of the street, Iwobi built the Museum of Silent Women, a space filled with stories, letters, and pictures of women who raised children in poverty, pain, and silence. Each wall told a different story, some heartbreaking, some heroic. Visitors left in tears, but also with fire in their hearts. Mothers brought their children to learn. Schools added the museum to their curriculum. Iwobi called it the most sacred building I've ever funded. It wasn't made of gold, but of grief turned into glory. Tired of waiting for politicians to listen, Iwobi formed the Street Parliament, a network of grassroots leaders from informal settlements across Africa. They met monthly to vote on ideas, pass local reforms, and drive neighborhood development. Each session began with the words, "We may not wear suits, but we wear scars, and scars tell truth." Over time, this network pushed for real policy reforms. Some became city council members. Others became ministers. The streets were no longer just surviving, they were legislating. A billionaire diamond tycoon from West Africa offered Iwobi a partnership. "With your name and my mines, we'll own the continent." The offer was dazzling: private jets, instant profits, global power. But Iwobi researched the mines and discovered child labor, illegal arms, and tribal exploitation tied to the business. He rejected the offer publicly. "We don't build empires on broken backs," he said. The tycoon mocked him. "You'll die poor." Iwobi smiled. "I was born rich. You just don't recognize the kind of wealth I carry." At a women's shelter funded by Iwobi, a young girl named Zawadi arrived. She was quiet, brilliant, and had scars on her arms from abuse. She wrote poetry, beautiful, sharp, healing poetry. Nia, Iwobi's wife, bonded with her quickly. One day, as Zawadi read an old poem about a mother who vanished in a market crowd, Nia froze. The details matched a child she had lost during post-election violence years ago. A DNA test confirmed it. Zawadi was their missing daughter. Tears flowed. They didn't hold a press conference. They just held each other. "You were never lost," Iwobi whispered. "Only waiting to be found." A young man from a wealthy family overdosed in Nairobi. Media focused on the tragedy of his fall from grace. Iwobi wrote a piece titled "Pain Wears All Colors" and shared it across his platforms. He spoke of the dangers of hidden depression, toxic masculinity, and how success often silences suffering. He launched a mental health campaign called Louder Minds, placing therapists in slums, schools, and even prisons. "I know what it's like to cry in silence," he said. "Let's teach our children that crying is not weakness. It's the first form of healing." Iwobi published his memoir, The Book of Dust. It didn't glamorize his success. It spoke of wounds, betrayal, broken shoes, hunger, and the loneliness of leadership. Within weeks, it became a bestseller across Africa and was translated into 14 languages. Students studied it. Prisoners cried over it. Entrepreneurs quoted it. But what moved people most was the last page, which read simply, "I came from nothing, but nothing is never empty. It is full of potential, full of you. Now go, rise." In a shocking twist of fate, the same conglomerate that had once tried to destroy iwobi now filed for bankruptcy. Their markets collapsed, their methods exposed, their executives jailed. The world watched as iwobi's ethical model, slow, local, street-rooted, continued to grow. Reporters asked him if he felt victorious. He shook his head. "We don't dance on graves. We build gardens over them, so that others grow instead of fall." One night, a slum in Kinshasa caught fire. Hundreds lost homes. Aid was slow. iwobi, halfway across the continent, chartered flights, raised emergency funds, and arrived before the government. As he distributed food and blankets, a boy asked, "Why do you keep showing up?" iwobi replied, "Because once upon a time, no one showed up for me. So now, I show up for everyone." That night, from the ashes, a mother gave birth under a plastic tent. They named the child iwobi. In the sky, for a brief, iwobi launched an initiative called the Time Bank, a revolutionary program where people, especially the poor and unemployed, could exchange volunteer hours for access to goods, mentorship, and training. A grandmother who taught young girls how to sew earned food credits. A recovering addict who cleaned schoolyards earned school fees for his sister. Value was no longer measured in money, but in time. "I was once seen as worthless," iwobi said. "But now we remind every human being, you are rich in hours, rich in worth." After years of planning, iwobi unveiled his most ambitious project yet, Kijiji Tech City, a self-sustaining digital town built entirely by youth from the streets. Powered by solar grids, eco-bricks, smart transport, and recycled tech, Kijiji housed over 20,000 residents and featured coding schools, innovation labs, and open markets. It wasn't just a city, it was proof that slum-born dreams could build nations. When the ribbon was cut, a former pickpocket-turned-programmer whispered, "We used to steal to eat. Now we build to feed the future." Despite his global recognition, iwobi returned to complete his formal university education. "Not because I need the degree," he said, "but because I once promised a younger version of me that I would never stop learning." He attended classes quietly, took notes, and often helped other students behind the scenes. His presence humbled both professors and classmates. When he graduated, he gave his certificate to his childhood bus shelter, framed under glass with a note, "We've made it, brother." Finally, a dying girl named Binta, who had leukemia, sent iwobi a message, "Before I die, I want to see the ocean. I've only seen it in your videos." iwobi flew to her hospital in Eldoret, spoke with doctors, and arranged a medical escort to the Kenyan coast. For 2 days, she played in the sand, watched waves, and laughed freely. On the third day, she passed away in peace. iwobi buried her near the shore, under a mango tree, and carved her name in stone. "We must fight to give beauty to even the briefest lives," he said. The sitting president of Kenya privately offered iwobi the chance to be appointed Minister of Youth and Innovation. It was power, prestige, and control, handed on a silver plate. But iwobi declined. "I am more useful outside your gate than inside your garden," he said. Systems change from pressure, not comfort. Instead, he offered to train civil servants through his foundation, ensuring that reforms reached even the lowest village. His influence only grew, not through title, but through truth. While in Ethiopia, iwobi was introduced to a forgotten monastery where ancient African scrolls and knowledge had been buried and ignored for centuries. He funded their restoration, digitized them, and launched the Library of Dust, a digital African archive preserving wisdom, poetry, science, and stories. "A continent that forgets its voice," he said, "will forever speak in borrowed tongues." Soon, schools across Africa began teaching from the collection. Elders who had never been published became immortalized. Dust, once again, became gold. An inmate in Kamatai prison wrote to iwobi, "I was your childhood friend. I went left when you went right. But I read your story for myself. And now, I dream again." iwobi visited him. Face to face, they embraced through iron bars. The man wept, "I stole shoes. You built nations. And yet, we started the same." iwobi launched Redemption Inside, a program giving inmates education, therapy, and post-prison jobs. "No one," he said, "is too far gone. We all just need one chance to begin again." A massive flood struck Mozambique. Entire villages vanished. Media barely covered it. Iwobi flew in with aid teams and filmed the devastation. He posted a video. It went viral. "Don't let us cry alone." In 48 hours, the continent raised millions. Music stars held benefit concerts. Orphaned children were rescued. Lost farms were restored. "We do not wait for saviors," Iwobi declared. "We become them, together." For the first time, Africa responded to itself with unity, urgency, and unstoppable love. During a mentorship session, a 12-year-old boy gave iwobi a gift, a small mirror glued onto a wooden board. Below it was written, "Look here. This is the man who saved my father, my school, and my smile." Iwobi cried for the first time in public. He hung the mirror in his office. Whenever the world felt too loud, too heavy, too political, he looked into it, not to admire himself, but to remember who he fought for. A new species of plant was discovered growing in the trash heaps of kibigere, a tiny, beautiful flower that bloomed only at night. Scientists named it iwobi stellara, the star that grows from waste. It became a symbol for youth across Africa, that even in rot, beauty can rise. Schools began growing it in gardens. Couples proposed near it. Painters painted it. Poets wrote of it. And iwobi, standing in silence one evening, gazed at the flower and whispered, "The street is no longer where I'm from. It is what I am." While visiting rural Senegal, iwobi was invited to join an ancient spiritual ceremony. Elders gathered under a baobab tree, chanting songs that hadn't been sung in 400 years. They called it the Circle of Remembering. Each participant had to speak the name of one forgotten soul. Iwobi stood and said, "Aking, my mother, and all the women who died uncelebrated it in silence." The wind shifted. Drums grew louder. That night, he wrote, "Legacy is not just what you leave behind. It's who you raise from the dust of memory." Iwobi faced his first major internal scandal. One of his top executives had embezzled millions from the Golden Seed Fund. When the truth came out, it shook his team and his heart. The public waited to see if he'd cover it up. Instead, Iwobi held a press conference, exposed the theft, apologized to donors, and stepped down for 1 month to rebuild the system's integrity. "Transparency must hurt," he said. "If it doesn't, it's just public relations." His brutal honesty made the people trust him even more. From brokenness, he rose stronger. A group of street children in Rwanda, inspired by iwobi, formed their own storytelling club. They called themselves the Children of Dust. With only charcoal and cardboard, they wrote tales of hunger, hope, and healing. Iwobi visited them in secret. They didn't recognize him at first, but when he read their stories, he wept. One boy wrote, "We are not waiting to be saved. We are waiting to be believed in." He funded their first printed book, distributed it across African schools, and added their story to the national curriculum. "You are not future writers," he told them. "You already are." Success, for all its glow, cast a shadow inside Iwobi. One night, he broke down exhausted, numb, unable to smile. Even surrounded by greatness, he felt alone. He began questioning everything: his mission, his motives, his strength. Nia sat with him silently, holding his hand. No lectures, no fixes, just presence. He began therapy, spoke openly about burnout, created safe spaces for male leaders to talk about emotional fatigue. Even lions, he said, need to lie down sometimes.